I have two questions, and the first one is about my brother and his death 7 years ago. He was manic depressive and schizophrenic, and he shot himself 3 days before his 20th birthday. And I've actually cleaned up a lot around how I feel about that experience, but I want to know more about my family and why we co-created that experience. And in particular, the year before he died, it felt like everything was turning around. It felt like we were finally finding the right doctors and the right therapists and the right programs. And it felt like there was the first time that there was a light at the end of the tunnel. Like I was beginning to believe that I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life crying over my brother and wondering what's going to happen to him. Is he going to be on the street? Is he going to be in institutions? Like, he was just in and out of my life so much because of this illness, and I've really let go a lot of the anger and the resentment that I had around that, or so I think. And then there are days, though, where I'm still just in rage, or just so much shame comes over me, what I did, what I didn't do, and I still have that with my family. Like, there are all these questions that it's just frustrating. It feels like it's never going to be answered. Like, it doesn't feel like there was a purpose for that. Like, why did we suffer like that for so long to have him die so young?
Well, you're putting a spotlight on many things that we would like to talk with you about, and we want to start just gently talking about the subject of death in general, because we think whenever someone comes forth with this sort of power and energy and leaves early like that, almost without exception, they come forth because they are wanting to make a statement and help you to get your thoughts around the subject of death to begin with. When someone old and tired dies or gets run over by a truck, everyone says, well, it was the best thing. But when someone just beginning with so much potential for a joyous experience before them makes their transition, then you say, not such a good thing. And we would like to find some words that would help those who are looking for them try to make peace with the eternal nature of your being. And we would like to put it into a scenario where you could really feel it by saying, imagine if you and your brother had gone to a movie together. And let's say that it was a movie that you had long been wanting to see. And he went because you wanted to go. And as soon as the movie got started, he began grumbling and saying to you, you might be having a good time here, but I'm really not. And then he said to you, I'll catch you later. And he just got right up and walked out of the theater. And you said, fine, go. I'm going to stay and watch this movie. We want you to understand that what happened was not bigger or different from that. When you understand that you are eternal beings who have endless experiences, and that just because you walk out of one movie theater doesn't mean that you can't walk right back into another, or doesn't mean that there's plenty of life experience that is satisfying even outside of the movie theater. And so we really want you to try to relax in this idea, because Jerry and Esther have two dear, dear friends, both of them women, and both of them critically ill. And both of them, doctors saying it's over or nearly so. And as Esther thinks about first she said to Jerry, I've decided not to have any more friends. And then she said, it isn't so much my discomfort with what's happening to them as it is my discomfort with what's happening to those around them who love them. And then we said to Esther, what you're feeling is your discomfort with the idea of death altogether. In other words, you all do not have it together about death. You offer your words, but most of you feel that you have these beginnings and endings, and this is what is bothering most of you about death. Some version of this. You've been convinced that you have a beginning and an ending, and that everything hinges on what takes place within your experience during that beginning that you call birth and that ending you call death. And you just torture one another relentlessly over your different versions of what you should be doing or shouldn't be doing during these life experiences. Whose rules, which rules you keep, how you live. The best thing that ever happened to Esther was the death of her father. Mm-hmm. We're not kidding you. Because in his death, she discovered there is not any.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm really fine with death. I mean, my father died when I was 10, and I let that go. And my brother's death in particular, like, there was such tremendous relief, though.
You say that. And most would say that. In other words, what they're saying is, I'm not feeling the pain that I once felt. But you used words like regret. It still feels to you like there was some waste of something, like something more should have happened.
And he suffered so much. And we all did.
So what we mean by the death experience that most people aren't over is, here's a better way of saying it. Most of you still have issues with being done. And we say, well, we would think you would, since there's no way for any of us to get done. We don't get done. None of us ever get done. And when we focus upon things that feel like endedness, and that's the sadness that you're feeling. You're talking about how he didn't feel good. You're talking about the torture that the rest of you felt around it. But we want to say to you that release into death was the release of all of that torture. In other words, that's worth a celebration right there. So you're in this terrible depression, and you find something to be angry about. And in the anger, at least you can breathe. And most people outside of you would say, oh, that anger is not a good thing. You should not allow yourself to be angry. But we say, go for it, be angry, because we can feel that in your anger, you are feeling relief and that you are breathing again finally. And then as you move from anger into frustration into hope, in other words, of course, there's a broad range of emotions, more than there are words to describe. And really, we're not so interested in finding the word as we are finding a way to help you realize that you can find relief. So take someone like your brother. Now, we talked earlier about if you're going 100 miles an hour and you hit a tree, it's much more unpleasant than if you're going 5 miles an hour. Some are just born moving faster. And so life experience, the way people treat them, the way they observe life experience, causes them to feel more resistance that because they're moving faster to begin with. And so they feel their emotions in a more powerful way. And when you are born into this environment where there are so many that are so aware of your behavior, then there are all kinds of people that are offering all kinds of explanations. They don't want you to turn to the relief of the drugs. They don't want you to turn to the relief of the alcohol. And they certainly don't want you to turn to the relief of death. In other words, most people don't know for sure what they want from you, but they expect you to damn well stay here and suffer like the rest of us. In other words, they expect you to find a way of working it out using the same mechanics and the same rules of the game. In other words, we're all in this together, and we say, often you come forth as powerful teachers that have a stronger message to make. And the message that this young being was making, a very powerful message, we would like to promote it to the boundaries of the universe, is, I am not supposed to suffer.
Yes.
And I refuse to do so. And while there are means of releasing resistance and finding relief that you all might approve of more than me taking a gun and shooting myself, this works for me.
Right. Well, actually, that makes a lot of sense, because, I mean, when he first died, the first thing I felt was tremendous relief that he wasn't suffering and that I wasn't suffering anymore. Like, I thought, oh, finally, I can rest. I won't have to worry about him ever again. Like, he's totally at peace. And then there's the guilt that comes from feeling that relief over someone dying and of a suicide. And it's hard because I can't share that feeling of relief with my family because I don't feel like they would understand it. Like, it would come off as cold, as though I didn't love him.
Wouldn't it be lovely if they could find relief before their death?
Yes.
Now, the reason that we are talking about this emotional meter or scale is because of people like your brother who felt the severity of the very dense emotion. And what happens so often when you feel like that and you have those around you who don't feel like that, they try to guide you, but they can't guide you because they don't feel like that.
Right.
What happens in most cases is you go from that deep, deep, deep depression and despair and feelings of unworthiness and lack of powerlessness. So what happens with so many is they find themselves feeling this way, and their self-survival resources throw them into rage or anger, which is an improved state of being. But as the world looks at them, the world says inappropriate, will not accept that as an improvement, and so then they just turn around and go back to Phoenix. In other words, so they go from depression to rage, depression to rage, depression to rage. But if they could discover rage on their terms and then say to the world, I've done this deliberately, now they're back in their own feeling of power, you see.
Yes.
So we want you to feel no regret about your brother, because he shined a spotlight that is beneficial for you and for others.
Yeah, and he opened up my whole life. Both his death and my father's death, like, helped me appreciate life and what I have so much more, and opened me up to this experience here, you know.
It is a very common thing that's when you really start wanting to figure out who you are and what the bigger picture is, when someone that you love makes their transition.
Mm-hmm.
We want you to ponder some of what you witnessed with your brother, and listen to the things that we talk about as we talk about releasing the resistance and finding the life-giving, joyous sensation of rage.
Mm-hmm.
And acknowledging that is an improved vibration, and then reaching for the vibration of anger and acknowledging that it is improved vibration, instead of being one who watches someone who you do not understand and condemns them for what they are choosing to do. And we think that this is the strongest message that he was offering, and we think that's why you are feeling so much regret, is because it feels to you that if somebody could have just heard him, that there could have been another way for him to find relief. And what we want to say to you, and we really, really want you to hear this, what difference does it make what method is used to discover the relief? We want so much for you to understand the joy and perfection that the death experience is. In other words, nothing went wrong, nothing is wrong, nothing should have been done differently. In other words, all is really well. So as you find yourself thinking back on this, and we can feel the layers of vibrations within you as you revisit this, we can feel that for the most part you've brought yourself into vibrational alignment. In other words, as we feel the vibration of you, we can feel that, as you said, you've come to terms with this. And we say, we think that you've come to terms with your brother's death and even with your father's death. But we do not want you to ever come to terms with feeling negative emotion that you don't find your own way out of. In other words, we, like you, think it is a wonderful thing for you to be able to open that gate and allow the source energy to flow through you here. And you know what's happening to you? As you deliberately find thoughts that release vibration and allow you to connect with who you really are, and you're beginning to taste what life is really supposed to feel like, anybody who isn't feeling like you feel now is hurting you a little bit. Whenever you experience something wonderful, you want everybody that you love to experience it too. And what we're wanting to say to you is that it is there for everyone, and the delay that they are fashioning about when they experience it cannot be that long, because in the death experience, they will experience it fully. So just soothe yourself by saying things like this. First of all, I don't really know what they are feeling. And I cannot measure the distance between where they are and what they believe, because I'm where I am. In other words, I can only measure the distance between what I want and what I am believing. And so I cannot accurately measure for anyone. In most cases, the pain that you think they're living, they are not feeling. Almost everyone finds ways of compensating for the way they feel, and they make their own alignment. And even if it's different than the alignment that you are making, they're still doing just fine.